Thank you. So Mateusz Kuchtyk, he will be our next presenter. Mateusz, I hope you are with us. He fell in love with aviation when he was only 14, and he started his journey at the age of 18. And since then, he worked for Jepsen. After that, he moved on to the airlines. He was also a member of the Polish precision flying team, and he became a flying instructor. Right now, he's a senior first officer, and he has spent close to 4,000 hours in the air. And right now, he would like to share some operation insights from Cockpit. Mateusz, the floor is yours.
Good day. Do you hear me?
Yes, Mateusz, we can hear you.
Perfect. So, very good day to all of you, and very warmly welcome you on this journey through aviation. And I was listening from the very morning of all the data and about all the informations shared by people from different aspects of aviation. So I will go from the more practical side. So yeah, as it mentioned, I became a pilot. Well, I started flying when I was 18, my PPL training, but I first flown when I was 14, and since then it become on my life. And yeah, right now I'm flying in airlines, which is I think the most difficult industry right now to work in. It's not the best, but still, I would like to share the presentation. So let me just check if you can see that then. Let me check if I can share. If not, maybe you can open the presentation from the place that we were sending them. Paulina, that would be very useful because I'm not pretty sure if I can do it now.
Yes, give me please 1 second. And
yeah,
I will
sure, no problem at all. No problems. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I was listening to the previous ones, and maybe I can answer also a question about the legal use of EFB as a maps in VFR in Poland right now, because I was also thinking about it for the trainees that I'm training in the Polish, in our aero club north of Poland. So it is legal right now to use data if you are able to prove that your data is current and updated, and then yes, of course you can use it in lieu of the paper charts as well. Like for a while, like a few years ago, you have to have a backup. You have to have either a electronic one and a paper backup. But right now, if you can prove that this data is being updated, you can use it. And actually, I use a for flight app for a VFR flights and IFR flight in general aviation as well. But in the airline I work for, we use this different company's data that has a office in Gdańsk as well, which is a competitor to Jepsen. So yeah, but for my personal flights and for the flight training I do, I use Jepsen for flight data, and yeah, it becomes very useful. But I'll just talk about it later on during the presentation. I don't know if you can open it, Paulina. If not, I'll just try to share the screen with
So Mateusz, I can see you've uploaded the presentation. The thing is that it's in a different format and I cannot open it.
Okay, so I will try to do it then. I will try to do it.
Sure, you have that green button share screen at the
yes.
Yeah.
There is desktop.
Hi guys, Mateusz, don't worry. We are just unzipping it and displaying it. Just give us 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it should work. It should work. I've done it on Apple computer, so maybe that's the problem because it's this Keynote stuff. Yep. So I would like to share some my views actually right now. So I'll just start from the presentation because I can see it for a while, but it's nothing major. So I will go for my view on navigation data, using navigation data in general aviation and airline operations. Because I still fly in both worlds. They are almost completely different, I would say. Like airline operation is very strict, very you are not filing your own flight plan, you are not checking your route. Well, you are weather-wise, but operationally we have operational team that files the flight plans for us. if there's any, for example, strike in ATC. We used to have last year summer, we used to have a lot of French ATC strike going on, and we had to avoid the French ATC or French areas as well. So our operational team just checks the flight plan for us. In general aviation world, it's more up to the pilot in command to take responsibility to check NOTAMs. The NOTAMs right now in this crazy lockdown COVID times are very important data to work with, because some countries are closing each other to another ones, and it's sometimes with a very short period of notice, and you have to keep an eye on it. And we have to also remember that general aviation, it's not VFR only, VFR being visual flight rules, so you fly with what you see outside, but it's also IFR and instrument flight rules, so you fly on a data that you see on your instruments, following NAVAIDS, or mainly right now in the world, AirNav procedures, so procedures based on the GPS, which are becoming way more common right now. And so I'll just talk slightly about that, about a navigation data in airline operations right now, as well as I would just like to show you a few cockpit views, because I started flying because I was taking pictures of airplanes, and I still do, even though I fly. I take quite a lot of pictures from the cockpit. I would like to share that still. I still call it office, the office that moves at quite high speeds and makes a lot of noise, but yeah, it gives us a quite unique views of the world and of all the weather and stuff around us. So is it possible to show this presentation now, or I should still fight and try to do it?
I think, Mateusz, you need to try to
Okay,
show it.
I'll just try. I'll just try.
Yeah, sorry.
It should work. Yeah, no worries. It should work, I guess. If not,
I'll try to open my other laptop. Maybe it will work with my book.
Okay. Because if not, then oh, there you go. What about this one? Do you see it now?
Yay, we can see it.
Yay! So we're home. Very good. Thank you. So sorry for the interruptions. We need to solve the problems. That's how it is in aviation and in the world. So I would like to share some operational insights from the cockpit. People call it flight deck now. Nowadays, they just try to not call it cockpit anyways, but that's how we start. That's how we call it. So we have the agenda. So as I briefly talked to you about, we're gonna go through navigational data and like insights from the general aviation side, from airline operations and cockpit views. But I would like to mostly base this, let's call it this presentation on a dialogue with all of you, because I'm not really fully aware on which, if I'm talking to the pilots mainly or the people outside, I'll just try to balance that act to speak with mainly not so precise aviation wording. But if there's any question you would like me to explain, feel free to do it. So the general aviation part, you can see the picture from the approach to Gdańsk airport. So it's because I'm based in Gdańsk, which is very, very, very good right now in this aviation industry to be able to still work from your home country, like let alone from your home city. But yeah, so we spoke about, Jakub actually spoke quite a lot and very, very nicely about ForeFlight as an app, but I would like to tell you more why the data that you have on board on your flight in general aviation is so important. First of all, it's mostly single pilot operations. That's a quite decisive factor from or divisive factor from general aviation and the airline industry, that you're a single pilot. So you have to check the weather, you have to check the NOTAMs, you have to check the availability of everything around you, the airspace. Military airspace right now, for example, in Poland is quite limited because there's a lot of NATO trainings, and the plenty of airspaces are being closed and open on a sometimes regular basis, sometimes like ad hoc. So, and apart of that, you still have to fly the airplane. And I heard Rafał speaking about fly, navigate, communicate, and that's completely true. But in single pilot operations, something that can give your situational awareness like grow, keep it high, is perfect. Sometimes you are flying somewhere with no navigational aids at all, like no VORs, no NDBs, no ILS coverage. There's no ATC as well on small airdromes. That's the ones that we mostly fly to. From my general aviation point of view, most of my flying is done as a flight instructor, but I still do some flights in VFR and IFR conditions across the Poland and close European region as well. And you have to be prepared. And to be prepared, you have to have data and you have to have information, because you have to know that there will be no ATC. You have to know that there will be no fuel, for example, for your fuel planning. And yeah, another thing is that most the airspace restrictions happen on lower altitudes, and lower altitudes are the most common ones you can find in general aviation airplanes, because they're mainly not pressurized, mainly do not have oxygen system allowing you to fly high, fly above the airspaces. Lots of training, of military training, is happening on the ground and at some altitude, which mainly affects your flight. And it's very good to have information and ability to, for example, midway, you receive information from ATC or from checking your data that some airspace is open, just to be able to fly around this airspace, because mostly if the airspace is closed for military reasons, you are not allowed to fly through it, even with coordination. And of course, another very important data that happens in flight as well that helps is higher risk of collision with terrain, which is mainly based on the lower altitudes that you fly on. And so this is actually what Kuba was talking about. What I like mostly about flight and applications very similar to that is that it helps you to focus more on flying, being single pilot, because this concept of the situational awareness, so being sure where you are. Flying is three-dimensional world. It's something very hard to imagine for people that weren't flying. That first, if something goes wrong or you're lost, because that happens quite often in VFR flights, you cannot stop. It's not like a car. You cannot stop and think, where am I? Where should I go? People, when thing goes bad, they go bad quickly, and the problems escalate. So you have to be on top of the game. There's a saying which I highly say that it is very, very, very good, that you should never allow your airplane to be where you were in your mind 5 minutes before. And that's called situational awareness. So you know where you are, you know where you're going, you know your airspace, you know the limitations of yourself and your aircraft. So the altitude, for example, being high, you can get hypoxic, you can your airplane will not be able to climb, for example, because you're going to reach the maximum flight level or altitude that your airplane is able to fly. And so having a application like flight helps you to do that, helps you to calculate the performance of the airplane. Because if general aviation is mainly conducted from smaller airports with a shorter runway, sometimes grass runway, you have to calculate the performance of if you are able to take off, if you're able to land with the mass that you have. And there is a performance calculator built in those apps, allowing you to see if you fuel to the maximum or the fuel that you require, you are able to take off. You can file a flight plan, so you can choose a route, for example, avoiding areas that you have en route. And from what you've created in the app, you can file a flight plan to Eurocontrol, and actually it's connected and they just call you to accept or say, okay, we have a flight plan, you're good to go, and that helps you to fly through controlled areas, and it's all legally done. Of course, you have NOTAMs, you have weather information. For flight shows you also the radar, the weather radar, of course. So it's very useful tool as well. I was flying not so long ago, less than 10 days ago, flying to south of Warsaw actually, and there was quite a lot of buildups, so storms building up. And on front flight, I could see where they are and what is the trend of them, how they move. And thanks to this information, we were able to easily avoid it, fly around and fly not in the path of it, but in the place it was before. But you could see the trend of the weather moving. And I have even a picture of me using that also for a students, because as a flight instructor, when I fly, I try to, after the flight, of course, debrief the flight. And if it's navigational flight, for flight allows you to replay the flight in 3D view, showing you where you've been, how high you've been, and you can see the deviations of a planned route. Then you can easily discuss what went wrong, what went good, of course. But it is very useful, and mainly for people that the more flights you do per day, the more significant the more significant ease of use it becomes, because like I, for example, have 3-4 flights, navigational flights per day with different students. So they prepare the route. And for me, preparing all the routes again on paper charts and preparing everything will take way more time. But I have everything prepared already, and then I can follow how they are doing. But they're flying on a paper chart. That's how we do it in our club at the very beginning. But I know that everybody, after passing the license, they all switch to electronic charts anyways. And of course, that's a picture from another flight I took with my friend recently. That was IFR night flight from Wrocław, and again, for a flight became very useful for that. We ended up landing at ILS category 1 minimums back home at night, and we were just checking all the data anyway. And yeah, it was way easier to do it with a chart that you have electronically. And of course, general aviation is almost fun. That's why I still do it. And I don't want to say that airline operation is not fun. It's more, I would say, stable. It's higher altitudes, very big margin for errors or anything. Your crew of 2 at least. And yeah, but we still have fun on general aviation flights. Now the airline operations. So right now we are in the very difficult times, as the previous people talking here were mentioning. The biggest problem in aviation itself is that pilots, the ground crew, ATC controllers, and everyone that is working around the aviation to be safe bubble, as we call it, are actually working on instincts and on a way that they used to do. And after lockdown, that we were shut, my airline was shut from the middle of March to the middle of June. Then as soon as we came back, we saw a lot of mistakes and things that were slipping, not only on the the flight deck operations, but on the cabin operations, ground crew. People started to lose their sense of how they used to do it. So we were instructed to take a cautious measures just to be able to go back to the aviation world again on a full power, going slowly. And that's how a very good data that we have and that we expect from the data providers like Jeppesen are crucial for safety of operations, because people which used to fly loads. I fly for low-cost airlines, so if the limit is 900 hours, that's how we would like to fly, 900 hours per year. So we are very proficient in flying, but then as soon as it stops, you start to lose your sense of this, what you know is possible, and then if the data is wrong, you might not be able to pick it up, and that's why this importance is high. Another thing why it is high, of course, is, as you can see on this picture, the previous one, is that right now we are in this autumn winter season in Europe, and we are entering a quite an interesting time for airline operations, which is mainly LVO, so low visibility operations, quite a lot of fog, de-icings, and we have to rely on purely on instruments, purely on what it is coded, what we have on charts, because sometimes we are not able to see anything. I remember landing in Bergamo, Milano, Bergamo, in Italy, with visibility of 125 meters all the way. And after landing, we vacated the runway. Of course, we followed all the procedures. We have LVO training every 6 months on the simulator as well. But then we're taxiing, and we knew the stand that we were supposed to go to. But then we asked, can you send us a follow to follow us to the stand, because we are not sure if there's anyone around. So from taxiway, it was like maybe 100, 150 meters. There was our stand that we were supposed to park, but we were unable to see it, unable to determine if there's any airplane around. So the data that we received, we have to rely on it because we cannot see anything. Another thing is that RNAV procedure is becoming more common, and RNAV from operational point of view is quite tricky because you are unable to determine if the data is correct or not. Sorry, that's not the way I want to go. If the procedure, the IFR procedure, is coded in conventional way, it bases itself on on navaids, on VORs, DMEs, so distance measuring equipments. We can sort of see if all the data that it is coded is correct in the space of space and the airspace around us. But for the RNAV procedures, we have to rely on what we think is possible and want. And how the procedure is coded itself, because it's mainly it's created by the GPS coordinates. And even a few days ago, I was flying to Olsztyn-Szymanek, one of the Polish small airports, which is slightly in the middle of forest, so it was quite foggy, and we were making RNAV approach, and yeah, we came out of clouds 40 feet above the minimums. And it was all good, all safe, but still, until the end, you're flying in a big white soup, and it's like you never know what is there, and we have to trust the data that we have. We have to trust the accuracy of the GPS, of the accuracy of the airplane's internal systems. And yeah, it worked fine, and now we see more and more airports switching from conventional 2D two-dimensional navigational systems like VORs and NDBs turning to RNAV, which allow you to fly on a vertical and horizontal plane as well. But still, in this situation, we sometimes fly to very interesting looking no-way airports, which the terrain is around us, the weather is not favorable, we don't see much around, and we trust the data that we have, and we trust people working for the companies providing the data that they do the best job they can. And another thing, which also was mentioned before by Jakub, that EFB is a tool to increase situational awareness. We spoke about it slightly. Airlines are a procedural monster. Like there's like everything is written down. Every procedure we have to follow. And right now, in these times where airlines struggle, every airline is struggling, and every airline is looking for cost savings in particular regions. our manuals change as well according to a new calculations, for example, and the manuals change. And because we work on the EFB platform, every day we go to work, we go to the office, we plug in our USB stick, and then we update the latest package for the EFB. And whenever we enter the airplane, the first thing we do, we update the EFB from the latest one that we have from the office. That helps us to prevent working on different manuals or not being sure what is actually correct at the time of what we do. Another very useful feature right now is CPDLC. So it's not an issue right now because of very low traffic over Europe and actually globally, as everybody knows. But way before, even last year's summer, flying over Europe was a complete, like the radio was almost all the time on. You could hear everybody talking, checking in. The ATC controllers were just swapping you from one controller to another. But then we implemented CPDLC, and right now in most of the countries above certain altitude, it's a requirement to use CPDLC. So it's a communication data link, which minimums, like it reduces voice communication significantly, and all the lateral like direct points, changes of flight level, changes in speed, next frequency is being transmitted via data link rather than voice, and that makes a radio way quieter, but it also decreases the risk of a loss of communications. There was a lot of incidents in Europe where flight crew were not able to talk to the controller. Like for example, in London FIR, it's sometimes you try to check in, you try to say, hello, that's me, we're flying here from there, but you have to wait 5 or 6 minutes before there's even a gap, the slightest gap to talk. But right now with CPDLC, it's reduced, and it really enhances the safety because you can focus more on where you're going rather than, hey, I would like to check in, I would like to say that I'm here. Yeah, and that's actually the key ring that we all received from a Eurocontrol, don't text while driving, text while flying. It is helpful. It's very helpful right now. Helpful tool as well. We can share right now, send the data, for example, to the next airport we fly, how much fuel we want, how many passengers we have, what time we expect our arrival, so they can be prepared and we don't have to talk to them. It's very simple. It easily helps us reduce our workload in the flight deck as well. So I would like to share also slightly like 2 pictures from many I have, and I take a lot of them. So here you can see, for example, a Malmo in Sweden and Copenhagen, city in Copenhagen, and the bridge connecting these 2 cities and countries with stars above. It's just before dawn. That's another thing about airline operations. You work 24/7. If you are a night owl and you have to wake up to go to work at 3:50 a.m., then the less workload is on you, the better, for the safety reasons, of course. I'm the one that I would rather fly until the late night than wake up in the morning. I've always been like that. So, but sometimes the views, as you can even see right now, are really good for that. And that's another one flying from Iceland. We were very delayed. It was like 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. and there was a lot of operational and weather issues this day. And we're avoiding over North Sea, some CB, some storm buildups, and you can see a northern lights as well in the background. And yeah, so airline operations, general aviation operations are way different, way different. It's like 2 sides of the story, but the big story is flying and aviation itself and safety of the operations. And I think, yeah, that's from my presentation point of view, but now I'm fully open for your I'll go for stop share. I guess that's it. I will wait for your questions. If you have any, just feel free to go for it.
Yes, thank you, Mateusz, for your fascinating overview. I would like to, there has been some questions already asked, so I'll delegate it to you right now. So from Piotr, you worked in Jeppesen for quite some time. Do you feel it was helpful in your pilot's career?
Yes. So I worked for Jeppesen for 4.5 years, and I was employed for a Honeywell data population project with depiction data. And yeah, so first of all, it helped me a lot to understand how the IFR procedures are built, like from the ground up. And it helped me also to see how easily mistakes can be spotted sometimes, or sometimes when the mistakes can be hidden as well. But it helped, yeah, it helped me mainly in the area of being able to understand the procedures, understand the other part of flying, because you take things for granted, like flying wise. You take a chart, you say, okay, that's chart, but who's behind that and how it works, how it's built up, how it's maintained. For most of the people that weren't working for a company like Jeppesen, it's like magic. So they say, okay, my chart comes from the iPad. No, it's way more complex than that. I think that answers the question, Piotr. If not, let me know.
Thank you. And Piotr, if you want to do the follow-up, yeah, there is a thanks. So I guess that you have answered.
Very good.
Yeah, so DJ said that taxiing is harder than flying sometimes. Do you want to comment it maybe?
Oh, so that depends on the airport. Flying is for people that are in aviation for a long time. Flying is like second nature. Taxiing is not. But yeah, taxiing in Barcelona, for example, it's not harder than flying, but it requires focus on way different things that you would actually imagine. And the biggest problem in airplanes is that taxiing takes you in close proximity to objects that you can hit. And in flying, we try to avoid things that we can hit. And so you have to take into consideration that your airplane, for example, the airplane that I fly is like 36 meters wide. And you have to take into account that the main wheels on the bigger one that I fly is like almost 20 meters behind us. So it is sometimes very tricky on airports that are complex, big in dimensions, like Amsterdam. I've never flown as a pilot in the cockpit to Amsterdam, but looking at charts, I can easily understand that it will be way harder to taxi on the airport than to land on it.
Thank you. There is some more questions.
Feel free.
One second. From Nazine, what is the most difficult place you have landed in?
That's a good one. I would say that there is no difficult place. It's difficult weather and difficult day. But I think that's hard. That is hard actually. But you mean general aviation or airline operations or both? But I think like weather-wise, Iceland is very tricky. The Keflavik airport, the wind blowing there is tricky, but it has 2 runways which are 90 degrees to each other, so the crosswind limitation is not a factor. But I think one of the most challenging but still more beautiful is Ålesund in Norway. It's a very beautiful airport located on one of the islands. The runway is short, it's less than 2,000 meters. And it's not even, it's not flat runway, it has a hill on it, and the wind and weather can play a huge role there.
Thank you. I think I open at a question box now. Okay, one question from the scene. When you reverse an aircraft, where is the rear view mirror?
That's a good one. Yeah, we sometimes, for fun, make a noise of a reversing truck. No, just kidding. Our reverse mirror is the people, the ground operations that they are our eyes and ears outside, and we have to fully trust them to not hit anyone around. So that's what I say. Like airline operations is a huge, it's a huge chain of small links, and that's a ground operation, which is the link for us, and there are our eyes and ears.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good answer.
Yeah.
And the question from Adam, I heard some ATC and pilot radios and noticed that ATC and pilots are speaking surprisingly very fast. What do you think about it? Is it fast speaking needed? And isn't leading to some dangerous communication problems?
So if it's needed, sometimes yes. Does it lead to some dangerous communication problems? Yes. So one of the biggest problems and actually challenges in ATC communication via radio, and that's another thing that CPDLC, so this data link, is eliminating, is different accents. So for us, for example, we always say that there's nothing more interesting than trying to communicate with Scottish ATC. And you would never like to have the Scottish ATC being angry, because then they talk fast and then you are screwed. But sometimes, like mainly in London FIR, you have to speak fast. But there is a rule. It's written rule almost. It's very common. If ATC is speaking fast to you and you reply slowly, they have to reply slowly. So their goal is to match the speed of speech which you are communicating to them. But yeah, it leads to some misunderstandings. That's why CPDLC is right now being used and is very useful tool, because it eliminates the speed, because it's just a written sentence, and a accent, because we fly everywhere from Greece, Italy, Iceland, Norway, France, and everywhere people use. We have, of course, one common language, which is even slightly different to English, but yeah, it differs from country to country, and sometimes, like for example, in countries like France, Italy, or Spain, we can hear people like pilots and air traffic controllers speaking their own language, which sometimes decreases your situational awareness, because you're not sure where is this airplane, where is it doing, where is it. So yeah, a very good question.
Thank you. Another one from Thomas. Do you think air-to-ground data use can be helpful in mitigating some of the language issues still present in aviation?
Yeah, I think I answered that actually right now with the CPDLC. So yeah, Simon, I think definitely that's a way bigger. It's like huge step into reducing the risk of misunderstandings.
Thank you. And another one. Did you get any problems with the drones while you starting or landing a plane? From PC.
So personally, I had one very close call with a drone while landing a smaller plane, but not on a big one. Not from my personal perspective. The problem is increasing, of course. But I would say that right now people flying drones are way more. I don't know what's the word to use right now, but they're way cautious about, and they are more aware about where they can fly. There are a lot of apps right now, so I hear a lot of information being sent to me that you have to be careful that there are drones flying there and there at maximum this altitude, and we try not to fly there. I can understand easily, and I understand how big of a threat the drones are, because of mainly the size and weight, and that's why you have in European Union you have the limitation of weight and size of the drones being able to fly, that you are able to fly in close proximity to the airports, because the bigger and the heavier the drone is, the bigger a threat it is. But personally, I had one very close call, and I hope to not have any more.
Thank you. Question from Jakub. Did you have any situation that you need to change the flight plan and land on another airport due to situation with passengers? How often does it take?
Okay, so I've landed maybe 20 times somewhere I weren't supposed. Well, I wasn't planning to. But you have to separate two things. One is flying to something which is weather or operational alternate, and one is passenger related information. Like, for example, I was flying once from London to Košice in Slovakia, and we had a passenger with heart attack over almost South Germany, and we decided to divert to Prague and to land for a medical assistance, and the guy survived. We sometimes have unruly passengers, and that are making our journey not so safe for the passengers, so we have to land and take care about it on ground, because as I mentioned, you cannot stop. The only way you can stop is to land somewhere, and sometimes we have to divert due to weather. So I remember flying to Norway to a place called Haugesund. It's pretty close to Stavanger, which is when we eventually landed, because in Haugesund, the fog just shifted over the airport. We were unable to land. We flown to Stavanger, and then the company called us, say, could you please take the passengers back? Because if they would like to, if they have to go by cruise, by ship, it will take 4 hours. We say, okay, we can see the weather is improving, we're gonna do it. And we flown 6 minutes. So 6 minutes versus 4 hours, but still we had to land. First, we have to land on somewhere else. So mainly weather related diversions, but passenger related, of course. That's a passenger world flying in airlines.
Thank you. Question from Jarek. Did you have any accidents related to with the bird strike?
I wouldn't call them accidents because I'm still here, but incidents, yeah, sure. That's something which is even right now very, because we right now see bird migrations all over Europe to some warmer climate, and yeah, I would say roughly 15 to 20 per year, and some of them are in the engines, but not. We don't have so much like we didn't have in our airline even the issue with a similar situation that there was in New York, which is very famous. It's mainly just a small bird hitting us in the fuselage, mainly in the nose area of the airplane. Yeah, but lightning strikes, bird strikes, we fly in the very dynamic environment. So yeah, the bird strike, I would say 15 to 20 times per year.
Thank you.
But they're mostly not threatening to anything.
Another question from Adam. Why aircraft producers don't include small cameras allowing pilots to see vital parts of aircrafts, wings, flaps, or tail? Despite high quality during manufacturing, we have witnessed a lot of incidents when those parts were damaged and pilots were losing quite a lot of time in understanding what is happening to the aircraft because they were unable to see how the damage looks and what parts are missing.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm aware that on the airplanes that are way bigger than what I fly, for example, Dreamliner, the A380, and a huge airplanes with way bigger wingspan that we have. Like, for example, the A380 Airbus, the double decker, has a wingspan which is greater than the length of the first flight of the Wright brothers. So, and people got it in 100 years. So that's thing that is it is huge and it is hard to taxi around. I would say that airport design actually tries to keep you safe from hitting your wing anywhere, because the taxiways are designed that if you are following the taxi line and anything is around, like everything like poles, another airplane is outside of the taxiway, and you are within the wingspan designed for this taxiway, it's impossible to hit anything if everything is followed correctly. But why there are no cameras? I don't know, really. I think that I might find them useful for some operations, but mainly if everything is going well, it shouldn't happen, but it still does. So maybe that's one other thing to take into considerations while designing new airplanes. I think it's like the biggest part right now that most of the airplanes flying were designed in the 70s, and they're just updated versions of the airplanes because they're flying safely, and people weren't thinking about this like this 50 years ago because of less traffic. That's my thinking of it.
Thank you. Oops. All right, thank you. And another question from, Isa. From the pilot's perspective, what would you recommend to providers like Jeppesen to change or add to the applications? Is there any data missing, or do you see as a high need?
To be honest, no. But I think there are just two ways why we don't like. First of all, all the apps that we use are being updated, and new things are added, and some of them we didn't know we needed until we have them. And second, that we actually got used to flying on less data than right now is required. And yeah, just on top of my head, I cannot think of anything right now that I would like to have more in the data. I think that's a very good balance of having right amount of good quality data right now, rather than putting more information, but for example, not being able to maintain them properly on the quality side.